So I'm just testing, so we know that you're on us on the live stream. I hope that my dear colleagues is gonna come back and let me know that it's working. To all of you that's watching abroad and online, we're gonna start the closing session in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned. Hello, hello, hello. It's not working. Is it working now? Do you see it working from you? Hör du mig i rummet? Väldigt lite. So they don't hear me here. Den var avstängd.
Den är på.
Är den på?
Det är bara att alla pratar inne så det är...
Okej, funkar det ut mot livestreamen? Ja, bra. So, it seems to be working. So we're all set for a closing session.
Okay, can we have the slides? Can anyone hear me? Yay. Well, for all those who managed to stay right to the end, the booby prize is you get to hear me. It's been absolutely wonderful. We're drawing to a close, so welcome to the closing ceremony. We all know that Sweden won Eurovision. But we think that AIDSImpact won World Vision. So it's not Loreen who's coming, it's Lorraine. I don't dance. I don't sing, but I know that you all do, and I know there is joyful voices or noisy voices sitting in the room, and they're going to help out on this one. So here we are in Sweden. We've been locked up in this conference center for 3 days, so we've not seen anything outside. We could have been on the moon. And what do we all think of Sweden? Well, we know it's the land of the midnight sun and those amazing northern lights. The northern lights are quite a phenomenon. They're unusual, they're bright, and they're quite weird. Lena nod. It's a little bit like us. This conference has been unusual, shining bright, and a little weird. We also think of ice hotels. Now, there's a funny concept. A bunch of dudes go up into the north, cut up ice, chip it, and chisel it, and make it into something quite amazing. And then they put reindeer blankets on blocks of ice, and crazy people go and sleep and stay there. A bit like us. We take the impossible, we chip it, and we chisel it, and we get all these people come in, just walk in. I mean, why are you standing? You're very free to just walk in. I'd love you to. And we have wonderful, cold but warm at the same time. And we sleep in reindeer blankets thanks to the progress we've made in HIV and AIDS. You know, the Nobel Prize was born here. We've got a lot of prizes today. We're going to outshine them. Herring, we've eaten quite a bit. People often say, I don't really like it, but it is kind of nice. And that's a little bit like some of our findings. Some of us didn't like what we saw, but actually it's good to have evidence and an evidence base. And I'm actually thrilled to let you know that we also have Sweden as the land of ABBA. Anyone heard of ABBA? And the great surprise is we have invited ABBA to come to the closing ceremony. They declined. But that's not going to stop us, is it? So let's take an ABBA journey. This is how it all started. Lena, who's quite amazing, said, take a chance on me. Me. Thank God, there's one in the audience. So we did. And we then, us in the international group, we had a dream. I had a dream. You're gonna do this till you get it right. And you all have to admit that the international board are great, but the Swedish Dream Team have just been fantastic, including... And this is your last chance. Nothing happens without the super troopers and dining like a one. Who were our super troopers? Well, the international board, we're going to name them, all the team. And you wouldn't believe how far they extend. I hope that Cheryl is watching us remotely in Africa, who's been providing all of our backup. You know, this doesn't just happen. The volunteers, the delegates, without you, we'd be nowhere. And there were so many of you, we couldn't believe it. Our sponsors, a call out for them, an act of faith, and we really appreciate it, especially the additional amount for chocolate biscuits. The IT, the conference organizers, the venue, everyone at the door, everyone. If I haven't mentioned you, I should have, and I will. And finally, just to say, as we think of what we've learned, I think I've learned so much, and really thank you for the music of all the presentations. Thank you for the music. Thank you for all the joy I'm living. So I say thank you for the music. You won't believe that this is completely unrehearsed, unprompted, and completely impromptu, but there we go. So I'm going to turn now to do some nice things. Lena, we really want to thank you. We've said it a million times, but now's come on through, everybody. Now we'd like you to just come forward, and we've been doing some cartoons, and we feel that we'd like to present you, and here it's like school prize giving, isn't it lovely? We'd like to present you, Lena, with a little memory to hang on your wall. A certificate because you were top of the class. And a magnet so that you stick with us. Woo! I hope the stage has got good support, because there's a lot of people going to have to come up here. I'd like to thank the local board. The co-chairs is Daniel. Daniel, are you with us? Yeah, well, come on up, Daniel. And for you, a lovely certificate.
Thank you.
And our magnet for sticking with us. Ronia. Yay! You've been amazing. There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Toys as well. We've got all sorts of things. Yucca. Yeah, yeah. Poor old Yucca, he had a triple extra large t-shirt and he was drowning, but we did find him a medium. Lars.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. And Bo? Oh, here we are.
Thank you so much.
There we go.
Thank you.
It's like the Stockholm archipelago. There's people everywhere on little islands. Good. So you thought you'd got away with it, but nothing happens without layers and layers and layers of committee. I love it. In the early session they said, the community, we are the community. So Peppy, where are you? Petty Catalan. Yay! It's so nice, embarrassing everybody. Bridget Prince, come on, Bridget. This is your moment. All these kisses, it's the COVID moment, isn't it? Udi Davidovich here. Ooh, Udi skiving, we found him out. Udi's not here, see me after class. You'll betcha. Lucy, of course, Lucy Kluber. Okay. I just want you to know, as you see Lucy Kluber, who's like, this little girl who helps us, she's the youngest female professor Oxford University has ever appointed. Unfortunately, Richard Harding can't be with us because he's dealing with illness in the family, and he's the most amazing support and carer, but he's done so much work for us, and I know he's watching us remotely. And we will bring your certificate to Brighton, Richard. Just you wait, it's going to come in the post. But can we have a round of applause for Richard? Bruno. I have two words in French, it's Bruno and je t'aime. Catherine, can you bring your own prize here and, and give it to yourself? And everything that happens, there's always another layer. We heard that from that kind of big data person. Our big data is Ari, who has done everything. Thank you. Oh, hasn't he come a long way from the Labour ward? Right.
I'm afraid.
Sorry.
Yeah, in the style of AIDS conferences, there is one interruption, which is to say the biggest thank you of all to the only person we know who can put ABBA into AIDS.
So now the more serious stuff. In our early days, we've been going for a number of years, we were blessed to have one of the most world-famous psychologists, Professor Marty Fishbein, who invented some of the social theories that all of us use every day. And sadly, we lost Marty at an AIDS committee meeting. But in his honor, we have created the Marty Fishbein Memorial Prize. And this is really just for people who are just amazing. And it's so hard. We had lists and lists of people to consider. But it's our absolute privilege. And I'm going to put their bios up, but tell you very little because our first Marty Fishbein Prize goes to Gretchen Backman, who has single-handedly probably taken care of much of Africa and the low-income world's children through her tenacity, her quiet diplomacy, and her endeavour to never let children off the funding and the provision menu. Gretchen. The next person is Dr. Veronica Svedem Johansson, again, a local person from Sweden who has done incredible work and of global renown. Veronica. It's a real pleasure. We then have the next category, which is Global Leadership Prize. And I think I'd like you all who are sitting in the room to congratulate yourselves because you're here, the work you've done. I mean, you all know the quality of the presentations at this meeting have just been mind-blowing. And the only problem is we had parallel sessions. We couldn't go to them all. But there's a few who stick out for years of diligent work, and it's my privilege and pleasure to award the first one to Professor Simon Gregson, who's worked for many years. And one of the, thank you. Incredible. And Daniela Rojas Castro. And the achievements of these leaders are to have long-term cohort data to bring together community research from across, to just get the motor going, and wonderful. And we're very happy to have lots more contenders at next time. And absolutely, our star shining, tomorrow's Nats Sayi Chimbindi from the Africa Centre. If we were the Nobel Prize, we'd have had photographers and all sorts of things. But we're just, you know. Yeah, are you sort of like graduating with something in that photograph, Netsai?
It was my PhD in 2017.
Yeah, you know, a little PhD here and there never harms anybody. And then, of course, we've got, you know, great talent in our midst. And we had a huge process of all our reviewers, we pooled the scores, we got the top 50, we read 600, I don't know, abstracts, a committee sat, and we came up with just some wonderful people. And then it turned out that two of them lived next door to each other or something and phoned each other, and they thought everybody was getting this prize, but there we go. So they are Dr. Josephine Nekakandi. Josephine.
Amen.
Dr. Bridget Anembabazi. Dr. Esther Kipp. Oh my God. It's a going home present. I love this party. That's so kind, thank you. Oh. And Sarah Magny. Well done, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Well done. Nice, isn't it, to have excellence just streaming up and down? So I'm going to end by telling you, as you all know, that Nobel was actually known for discovering dynamite, not for his prize. And I think there's some funny story that maybe they thought he had died. This is a story I have. And there was and they wrote an obituary, but it was actually his brother who died. And he read the obituary and he said, "Oh my gosh, is that what I'm going to be remembered for?" So he changed it and made the Nobel Prize. And his words were, "One can state without exaggeration that the observation of and the search for similarities and differences are the basis of all human knowledge." And I think that's really what we've done today. So we've shown dynamite as well as prizes. And I suppose from the brilliant mental heights down to the Eurovision bottom, did you know that Lorena sang a song called Tattoo? Hands up if you've got a tattoo. Okay? Well, you know, what we learn about everyone. And some of the words about tattoo is, "It's time to say goodbye until," I don't even know the tune, it was not that catchy after all. And nor does Angelina until we meet again, because this is not the end, and all I care about is you. You stuck on me like a tattoo. Quite good words, isn't it? Okay. So, as we release ourselves from the jaw of the shark into a bubble of happiness, let's have some sense from a profound contributor to the HIV world, who is Robin Gorner, who is going to do a sort of trip down memory lane or something like that. I did ask Robin if she could kindly wear sort of, something with a little bit of colour, but she insisted on being in grey. So some final words from Robin Gorner. And it would take us so long to tell you all the achievements of Robin that what would happen is you'd all miss your plane. But let's hear her words.
Well, thank you for the honor of being here today. Ik ben blij hier te zijn en ik wil de organisatie bedanken voor deze uitnodiging hier van mede te komen spreken. And in case you think I'm in the wrong place, and I certainly have the wrong accent, apologies to the Dutch in the room. I said those words in 1991 when I was part of the opening ceremony of the first biopsychosocial aspect of AIDS conference. And the opportunity that was given to me by Lorraine and the organisers was to spend some time with you looking back at our histories in order to move forward. And it was quite striking to me to realise that I had been at the opening of the first conference, and here I am at the close of the 15th. So it wasn't that I thought I'd gone to the wrong place. And I just wanted to say a few things about that history. And my history goes a little bit further back than that, indeed, to 1986, when I first got involved, 5 years into the first pandemic of my lifetime. And I wanted to share with you just some brief reflections. As I worked on this, I realised I needed to write a book, so that's a kick in the pants, because I did start trying to do that a few years back, so hey, it's a bit of a wake-up call. It reminded me that in 1991, there was much that we already knew, but actually the global response was still very young. It was 5 years after I joined the Terence Higgins Trust, which some of you will know is the UK's leading AIDS charity. And I joined them as a volunteer whilst I was at university. I'd like to say I was at kindergarten, but that's not true. And they had sent me to the European Commission. So in 1991, the reason I was trying to learn some Dutch was that I was representing the European Commissioner's European Commissioner Papandreou from DG5, because THD had realised that with the unification of Europe, HIV would be an issue. But the European Commission didn't have any people, but they said to THD, we've got money. And THD went, great, we'll have your money, we've got people, we'll send you the one who speaks French. Clearly not Dutch. So off I went, and it was an extraordinary privilege. I was able to fund quite a few conferences, including the first European Conference on Homosexuality, I don't know whether any of you were there, and indeed the first Biopsychosocial Aspect of AIDS conference. Fortunately, over the last few years, there's been some great changes, including that they realised that AIDSImpact was a better way to say biosocial, psychosocial aspects of AIDS. But I do want to really give credit to Pepe and Lo, among the original founders of the conference, for the fact that right back then, a decade into the epidemics, and they really were epidemics then, they knew that yes, this was an assault on the body, but it was also an assault on psychology, on societies, on cultures. It changed everything. And that was at a time when really there was such emphasis on finding treatments, because we didn't have them, that we could easily lose track of the fact that this was a holistic issue. And I give credit to all of you, particularly those of you who got prizes just now, that you keep on realising that fact, because it would be really easy to lose that focus. I also want to give credit to the fact that a couple of us appear to have dyed our hair white. I don't know how we did that, but that Lorraine does still like a boat. I also as I look back, can't, as a British person, be anything but distraught that I started my work at a time when we were joining the European Union, and we've made some terrible changes in my lifetime. Certainly my country has. And Julia, what a wonderful presentation this morning, and it gave me so much hope to think that Europe will step forward and do something really concrete about stigma and discrimination. So kudos to all the Spanish working on that. As I said, I could write a book about this. I just pulled out a few themes as I looked through my clutter, otherwise known as my archive, and some photos. And these were some of the themes that I thought about in terms of what we've done so well in the past and what we need to hold on to as we move forward. And my first point is about internationalism. So remember, when we first met as an AIDSImpact community, UNAIDS hadn't been born. It was only born in 94, and AIDSImpact started in 91. The International AIDS Society was just 3 years old, and it was 1 decade after that first report in MMR of a few gay men in the western east coasts of America having been diagnosed with HIV. And I think many of us were already passionate internationalists. And I think the fact that we worked together and we met at conferences, also for many of you, can you imagine? It was before email, it was before mobile phones. We had to talk to each other in foreign countries, and I think that changed things dramatically. In my work at the European Commission, one of the things I was really fortunate to do, and I only stayed there a year, was to fund incredible networks. Eurocaso, the European AIDS Treatment Group, of which I was one of the founding directors, and I'm so thrilled to see the energy in the EATG and the way we've been hearing about community-based research and meaningful engagement and co-production. It's that energy has really grown across Europe. We also created the HIV and Migration Network, and it was run by Richard Rector. Richard was one of the first people diagnosed with HIV in San Francisco, and he went to work with the International Red Cross Red Crescent, met a woman called Mary Howe-Knipe who worked in the UN, and he understood really quickly that HIV had to be international. And I just wanted to remember Richard, but I also, as I thought about what we did internationally early on, I also found this photograph of his funeral, and I'm walking behind Noreen Kaliba, whom some of you will know is the remarkable founder of TASO in Uganda, and there's Kalle Almedal, whom we lost a few years ago from Norway. And you know, early on we were really, really connected as communities, and I think it's so important that we hold on to the fact that the local is global and the global is local. I also found this little one in my archives, and I'm sure many of you noted that 2 days ago it was the 40th anniversary of the Denver Principles. The Denver Principles that led to the agreement in London in the 1980s for the global, for GIPA, the greater involvement of people with AIDS, which transformed to the meaningful involvement of people with AIDS. And in the UK, we had this phenomenal group of people living with HIV, frontliners, that didn't continue beyond the treatment era. But that was really where I did my growing up. And I just wanted to remember, as we think about being internationalists, to also think about the activism that is the core of the movement in HIV that has driven us forward. And again, we heard some fantastic presentations this morning related to that. You know, it's only the little short woman who hasn't yet dyed her hair white who's still alive in this photograph, which comes from 1988. And if you can squint and see, there are 2 banners there. One is ban discrimination against people with AIDS, and the other is government must fund AZT, which was the only option on the table in the late 80s, and in fact did for some people far more damage than it's worth. And I really just want to honour John and Patrick and the other John and Nick and the others in the photograph. But I could keep on and on and on, and I'm not going to do a litany of names, because looking through my clutter, I found over 60 of these funeral cards just from 88 and 89. And I say this not to be maudlin, but I do remember talking with Simon Watney, who is an extraordinary thinker and writer, if you have not seen his work or followed it. And I remember back in the 80s and 90s, we used to talk about multiple bereavement. What would it be like to be at this stage of the epidemic where there was treatment and when so many had died? We didn't quite predict how it would affect us. I'm not sure we know how it's affected us. We used to reflect on Hannah Arendt's writing and the writing of others who'd experienced catastrophes and horrors and multiple loss of that kind. But I just wanted to make sure we remember that we stand on the shoulder of millions, thousands of bright and brilliant men and women and people of all genders who didn't survive the treatment miracles that we saw. In America, there were often really phenomenal responses, as we would all know, particularly from the ACT UP movement. And this is a great photographer, David von Rovisch, who didn't survive his AIDS diagnosis. And there were many men in ACT UP who had their funerals as political funerals, including scattering ashes on the grounds of the White House. And of course, we then had 1996 and the Lazarus Effect, and I'm sure many of you have seen this extraordinary photograph of the woman from Haiti, and this is her in all three images from Paul Farmer's work in that country. And the global is local. And the transfer of knowledge and passion and engagement across the world is so incredibly important. In 1998, just after we'd had the remarkable news of heart in the Vancouver conference, I co-chaired a conference called Bridging the Gap in Geneva, and the year after it was the conference in Durban. And Bridging the Gap often I remember because it was so depressing. We couldn't get a single pharmaceutical company to come and talk about access to treatment. People would say we had one world with hope and the other with no hope, and that was the majority world. And look how things have changed. And as we look forward, we must hold on, I believe, to that energy and that passion and that rage that inspired our activism about no treatments, not good enough treatments, and treatments not reaching the right people. Thanks, Pepe. So, internationalism and activism, what else can we hold on to from the past? Human rights, and human rights is women's rights. Certainly, that's where one of my big passions is. Again, here we go through my clutter. I found this from World AIDS News. I had worked on the 1992 conference, a conference that happened in Amsterdam. And it happened in Amsterdam because it was supposed to happen in Harvard. Remember that photo of frontliners? We were out there protesting because the US was discriminating against all people with HIV and refusing entry to their country. And so Jonathan Mann, the remarkable visionary leader of the Global Programme on AIDS, which was the precursor to UNAIDS, stormed out. Well, it's not quite as simple as that, but anyway, he set up the Health and Human Rights Centre at the François-Xavier Banyou Centre at Harvard University, and he said, we're not going to have this conference on American soil, we'll take it to Amsterdam. And human rights and HIV and health have always been entwined. I think we've also seen that come back into public conversation with the COVID conversations. But I just wanted to remind us all that we've had this conversation for many a decade, and we must never lose sight of it. In one of my current roles, I review all of the funding requests that come to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB and malaria. And one of the things we find about all of them is the two main barriers to progress, in my opinion, are poor systems and a lack of respect for rights and equality. So this is what we have to get right. Obviously, many of us are talking about the anti-homosexuality bill in Uganda right now, and it is shocking and it is awful. And it also exists in many other countries, and we know that the energy that led to that bill passing through Parliament is present in a number of other countries, whether it's Kenya, Tanzania, Niger, or indeed a bill that's recently passed in Indonesia that may well have very similar effects. So let's redouble our efforts on human rights. And this was kind of a little bit just sort of for the sake of it, because I found these pictures of Prudence Mabele back in 98, I think, 95, with her health minister, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. And one of the things I loved about Prudence was that in her energy as a woman living with HIV, she never lost sight of the fact that the broader women's rights struggle was always fundamental in all of the conversations. So there she is, protesting about broader attacks on women's rights. And there's just a random kind of gratuitous proof copy of my book. And then this is something that reminded me of when I last came to Sweden, was soon after that man in America had signed the global gag rule and tightened it and prevented women all over the world from getting access to abortion. And there's an image there by Barbara Kruger, one of the great artists of America. And actually, I couldn't find it, but there's a brilliant photograph of the Swedish cabinet at that time, who I'm sure, I don't need to tell the Swedes in this room, had a feminist foreign policy and stood up and with a number of others said, no, he doesn't decide, she decides. And we very deliberately stole Barbara Kruger's art in leading a movement of women's activists. And I just wanted to put this up there to say that I do believe that the attacks that we're seeing on LGBTQI plus communities are the same as the attacks on women's bodies, and we really need some great allyship. So finally, looking back, what else do we see, or do I see, that really is significant, I think we need to hold on to as we move forward? I do believe that part of why we had that phenomenal impact of the activists in the early years is because they deployed remarkable communication methodologies. If you've not read Avram Finkelstein's book, I recommend it to you highly. He talks about the rise of grand fury, the silence equals death image, which is now so iconic. And there's the film BPM 120, which I think is a particularly brilliant way of telling the story of ACT UP in Paris, and many of you will know how to survive the plague. I'd also already put in my notes, but thank you, Berrine, for mentioning it, that Nan Goldin's movie, The Beauty and the Bloodshed, is an incredible example of how that activism can move forward. And she's always been one of my kind of iconic favourite artists in terms of the work she did in the early AIDS crisis, and she's taken that passion and rage of ACT UP and transformed it in terms of the fentanyl crisis. We have much to hold on to that is brilliant of what we did in the past. We also used our communication mechanisms in a more direct way as well, telling stories. One of the weirdest things I did at THT in the early 90s was advise on the Mark Fowler storyline on EastEnders. Some of the older Brits in the room will know what I'm talking about. And now EastEnders has a new storyline on HIV as well. And that changed hearts and minds. One of my dear friends also advised on the woman living with HIV in those early stories. And I really think we changed public understanding. I think we need to do more of that. MTV's brilliant set of shows, Sugar, does a huge amount of that across a wide range of African countries. And of course, that stands on the shoulder of Soul City. But as well as that direct kind of edutainment, I think we also changed the way health education has been done in our world. I think before AIDS, we never had this creativity unleashed in the way we talk to each other about our health, and we put it in the context of our lives. We have made some really raunchy, sexually explicit material back in the day, and that was very innovative and important. And here's just a few of the examples that I found. And so to end, I found this slide, and it really shocked me because I wondered if you can imagine when this came. It was in 1988. A full 8 years before we had highly active antiretroviral treatment. So in the middle of New York, the epicenter, people were saying that the epidemic was over 7 years after it started. There's a hashtag COVID is not over, which for me as someone who's been living with long COVID is very meaningful. But AIDS is not over, but it's really, really, really different. And I've felt that very strongly at this conference. So what do we do as we move forward? I don't believe we should be competing with other social justice issues or other emergency issues in our world, but we need to find great ways forward to retain our internationalism, to retain our activism, to make rights be at the centre and to communicate brilliantly with each other. And we must do all of that based on evidence, and that's why it's been such a privilege to be with you here all over these past few days. I just want to end by thanking David, and I'm wondering if I can see him in the room. I met him at breakfast on the first day. And I want to say to those of you who've been around for 20 plus years, for 3 decades, for more, what he said to me, and he smudged my mascara, which is, thank you for your service. And I want to say to all of you who are newer in this room, who've only perhaps just started to do your research, and who are in the first year or decade of your work, thank you for your service too, for the work you've already done and that you will do, because it is so needed. We once had a conference where we had the dinosaurs and the chickens as little stickers to understand whether we were, experienced veteran AIDS activists or newer to the game. But what I've loved about this conference is that really genuine sense of connectedness between everyone. So may I return to the right language and say, I hope I get it this right. Jag är glad över att vara här och vill tacka arrangörerna för denna inbjudan att tala.
We're not going to need aeroplanes to fly home. We'll just go on the energy. But it might be near the end, but it ain't over yet, because it's wonderful to know that we've been plotting and planning, and it's a real privilege to ask Dr. Mehdi Kouri, who's going to come and talk to us about the next AIDSImpact conference.
Thank you very much, Lorraine, and not Laureen. And thank you, AIDSImpact community, for trusting us and for giving us the privilege to host the next AIDSImpact meeting in 2025 in Morocco. So I know that everyone can't wait to go out and enjoy the rest of this sunny and lengthy summer days that we're having today. So I'll be very quick. I thought that I might start first, maybe with just an overview about what it looks like for the HIV landscape in Morocco. So that you know where you're going to. We're having a very low prevalence, but when we go to the key populations, it can be quite high as prevalences. We have quite a nice HIV cascade, but we have reached the second and third goal, but the first one, people do not test enough, so that's something we need to work about. We're all working in Morocco in a nice way with the government. We are included. We are sitting at the table. Of course, we as civil society think that it's not enough, that they can do more, and we are pushing and we are doing advocacy work. We get some help, sometimes from very high level. Like, for instance, once we had the king visiting an infectious diseases ward and handshaking with the person living with HIV. That helped us a lot. So we're building on that. And with all that efforts, we have been able in our country to see a decrease in the number of the new HIV infections, which is quite an exception in our region, which is North Africa and Middle East, where the number of new infections is still on the rise. Actually, it's even skyrocketing after the COVID crisis, and where we in the region we have less than 37% of ART coverage, so a lot needs to be done. So all those issues can be discussed in the next conference. The conference will be organized by my organization, AIDSImpact, which stands for Association de lutte contre le sida, which is a founding member of Coalition Plus, which has more than 35 years of existence, working on HIV, on services, prevention, support, human rights advocacy. We do a lot of human rights advocacy and research. We have been publishing quite few papers, but it's never enough, right? We are also service providers. We do HIV testing. We have mobile testing. We are offering PrEP in a community, in our community sexual health clinics. And we also had our share in organizing conferences. So we are very thrilled and excited to organize the next conference. I just wanted to add that Morocco is in the crossroads. You can easily get to Morocco from everywhere, from Europe. It's only 1 hour. It's only 1 hour flight from the closest cities of Spain and Portugal. So it's very easy to get to Morocco from everywhere. So you're the most welcome. And coming to experiencing this conference and experience in Morocco, I thought that this picture sums it all, because it's a nice mix of the old. We can see the walls of the capital, the city of Rabat, the walls that dated back to the 12th century, but also it's also the modern. We're building the tower, what we thought would be the highest tower in Africa, but we've been beaten by the Egyptians, who built even higher tower. But still, it's modern and it's there. So you will be the most welcome in Morocco in 2025, and I hope that I can see you there. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, we have come to a closure, I think.
Yes. Thank you. To end stigma and discrimination against people living with HIV, to stop epidemic, to end AIDS, community leadership is crucial. People living with HIV must be included in every step, from research to prevention to campaigns. As a person living with HIV myself, and as the operations manager of Positiva Gruppen, an organization for people living with HIV, it therefore feels great to have been the local organizer of this conference. I would like to take the opportunity to thank my team of colleagues and volunteers from Positiva Gruppen who have put so much effort into this event. You are amazing. And last but not least, I would like to thank Lena Nilsson Schönesson. She has been a partner of Positiva Gruppen for so many years. Without her, this conference would not have happened. Lena, you have spent countless of unpaid hours on planning this conference, and on behalf of both the local and the international board, I want to offer my sincerest gratitude to your work and commitment to AIDSImpact 2023. Thank you.
Well, that was a surprise. Well, I must say that I'm deeply moved and I feel extremely honored. And I have been working within the HIV field since the early 1980s. And now being retired and coming closer to the 80s myself, you know, it's wonderful. I find this AIDSImpact conference here in Stockholm being the peak of my career. So, as I started once saying on Monday, that my dream was to bring AIDSImpact conference to Stockholm. And so it happened. And now it's time to say farewell or auf Wiedersehen. And on behalf of the Swedish local board and the AIDSImpact International Board, I want to express our deepest gratitude to all of you, the plenary speakers, chairs, and sponsors, and all your contribution to this conference. You have all shown the multifaceted elements of HIV. And at the end of the day, the basis of HIV is the human rights issues, and in particular of being I am who I am.